Hi, I'm Nolan Peterson, CEO and President of World Copper Ltd, a Vancouver-based junior mining company with assets in Chile and Arizona. Happy to be here today to discuss our projects, Escalones and Zonia, which are our two premier assets, both at a PEA stage, both with 43101 studies backing them. Today, I also have a colleague of mine, John Drobe, who's our chief geologist, leads our exploration efforts on both of the projects and our other assets in the company.
Nolan, thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction. Good to have you on this show, this interview, this talk, whatever we call it. John, nice to meet you as well. Nolan, I think in one of your previous interviews, you dropped the comment that no one had heard of World Copper, or many people hadn't heard of World Copper, and I'm afraid to say that I'm one of those people. Mm-hmm. So researching this and looking at the assets you've got and kind of seeing what you've done in the last couple of years and your listing in the last 12 months, it's been an eye-opener. And so I look forward to learning more about your company in the next half an hour or so.
Yeah, great. And that's what we're here for, to get the message out and to build awareness. And every new person that hears about us is a great thing.
Good. So let's get straight into it. You've got two assets. Well, you've got three assets. You've got you're operating in two countries. You're operating in Chile and you're operating in the US. And you've got the Zonia project in Arizona, where it's summer now, or coming into summer, coming out of winter into spring and summer. And you've got the Chilean assets in the mountains. You've got one up on the border with Peru, but your main asset at Escalones. It's at a height of around 3,700 meters. I've managed to see in your corporate deck. Yeah. And I've also just seen that you're just about to start drilling there, and you've just put out a pretty punchy PEA on it. So I think for the benefit of viewers, could you just summarize the work that's been done on Escalones and what's going to be happening in the next? Well, first of all, we'll look backwards and see where you've got to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, what you mentioned earlier is how young a company we are, but nonetheless, the news flow has been very impressive, the work we've done over the last year. So we picked up the Escalones project as a private company. This was before I joined the company. It was a spinoff of another company called Wealth Minerals. And then we did an RTO listing last January 2021, and that created World Copper as a public entity. Since that time, we've done a tremendous amount of work on the Escalones property. The first part was metallurgical test work to change the understanding of the resource from a sulfide operation to an oxide resource that would allow an SX-EW oxide heap leach project. And then as you said, we then put out a preliminary economic assessment in February that was quite impressive, $1.5 billion post-tax at 360 copper with a 46.2% internal rate of return. Now, what we mentioned was how young this company is. Only publicly traded for a year. How many people have heard of this story? To release that type of news with such explosive numbers has created a little bit of excitement in the market. And now we are trying to capitalize on that and build awareness. In the meantime, while we were doing all of that with Escalones, we also completed a merger with a company called Cardeo Resources to bring in the Zonia asset in Arizona. This is a brownfield SX-EW oxide heap leach copper porphyry project in Arizona, another attractive mining jurisdiction that we believe can be fast-tracked to production in a 3 to 4 year timeframe and start generating impressive cash flows immediately. So we've only had that project in the portfolio for the last 2 months completely, and it gives us an option to continue to advance Escalones, which we're doing right now. As you mentioned, we've started a drill program as of a month ago that's ongoing right now. Myself and John have both visited the site recently, and as the season ends in Chile, we'll have this option to move to Zonia, restart our understanding of that deposit, update the PEA that was prepared in 2018 for that asset, and basically do an assessment and lead it into a fast track FS next year. So yes, it's a very exciting time at World Copper. We've done a lot of work and there's a lot behind us, but even more ahead of us.
My goodness, there's a lot to unpack in there. Thank you. That was quite a deluge of information.
Yes.
I will come on to Zonia. And we'll talk about that, but let's going back to Escalones. Okay, so the last drilling, I mean, in your presentation, you said that the last drilling was 2012, 2013, 9,000 meters or so was drilled in that time then, which is getting on for 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And you've resubmitted for metallurgical test work, but you haven't done any new drilling. So are you able to access the core, and what's the quality of the database like? And can you cross-reference the samples with the certificates to the core? What's the status of the information that you've got access to? I mean, perhaps this is one for John.
Yes, we have access to all the core that was drilled since 1999, basically. We had it all. It was all photographed. About half of it was photographed when we took over the project, and then we re-photographed the first 10 years, or the 1999 to about 2009 stuff was had to be rephotographed. So we did that, and then it's all in a core warehouse down near the site.
And from that, were you able to then reassess the kind of the base of oxidation and the transition?
That's what it was done. Yeah, basically, when we took over the project, we slowly got the data up from Chile. At the time, we couldn't travel down there, and that's when I started looking through the core photos and realized that again about a third of them were missing. So we had those redone. And then as they were sent up, I just went through hole by hole, looking at every photo, correlating it with what we had in the assay data and the logging data, and then realized that the entire deposit, the bulk of it anyways, was oxidized. I had just come off a project that I worked on for a couple of years down in Peru, in the kind of not too the same belt, more or less. And it was shocking how similar what I was seeing in the core photos was to Escalones. So there were no surprises basically when I then took the samples. I pulled after reviewing all the core photos, then I pulled intervals off in 2 batches down to 300 meters. Anything over 0.1% copper was sent for sequential leach analysis, and that confirmed what I was seeing visually, that indeed, the upper portions of the holes were like over 90% acid soluble, and then it transitioned down to more secondary copper, and it averaged over 70% leachable copper, basically.
And when you say secondary, do you mean chalcocite? So are you starting in kind of a malachite cobalite zone? I mean, actually, cobalite's a secondary as well, isn't it? So what's your mineral suite, and from the top down? Can you see it visually?
You can see it quite visually in the core. Yeah, you can't see the chalcocite, of course, and that's one thing that they didn't log that well either. That was one of the things that was kind of it was very hard to tease out the chalcocite data in their logging. It was in there, but they never plotted on any of their sections or anything. It was kind of odd. They realized it was enriched down to 300 meters, but they never really did anything with it. They did, though, some of their metallurgical samples. They did do some oxide rolls and stuff, but they were really focused on getting out the gold, silver, and the just the primary copper is what their metallurgy was focused on. But going back to what you see from the surface down, the primary green copper oxide is chrysocolla. And then you have like the black copper oxides, like tenorite. And there's not that much malachite in it. Considering that in the skarn, you see malachite for sure, but there's surprisingly little, considering that it is a skarn. Most skarn, you see malachite right at surface and some azurite. If you go in some of the, let's say the upper working, there's one adit that goes in the mountain, and in the upper skarn, magnetite garnet skarn, you see it, but not that much in the drill core. You see azurite right at the base of the oxides where it transitions to more of a true enrichment zone. So primarily, 80% of the oxidized copper mineral is a mixture of chrysocolla, and then brown kind of copper oxides, and then just sooty chalcocite.
You talk about the base of oxidation down to 300 meters. Is there a kind of a supergene blanket which is kind of higher grade in that 200 to 300 meters, or is it kind of not quite on the base of oxidation?
So that upper 300 meters has been enriched from the primary grades. The holes that they drilled, Trimetals did several deep holes going down 700-800 meters, and you can see that the primary grades are more around 0.1 to 0.15, maybe up to 0.2, with some higher grade intervals for sure inside there. This is just the porphyry level, right? The skarn's a different story altogether, so that's been enriched 2 or 3 times to get to the grades we see in that upper 300 meters. So it's and that's kind of a carapace. It's just an active supergene blanket. It's not an old one that's been eroded down into. It's at 300 meters. It gets a little thinner on the limbs of the ridge, but under the main crest of the ridge is 300 meters down, and it maintains that pretty consistently all the way down to even where we're drilling now. So,
and does the mineralogy get fruity in the skarn zones off the edges, kind of on the halo, or is it because it's a supergene feature? Is it a relatively simple mineralogy, even though it's on top of a skarn feature?
It is. It is still a pretty simple mineralogy. It's surprising there aren't any zinc sulfides. You don't see any sphalerite or any that kind of sweet that you normally see in a skarn zone. It's all copper minerals basically. So it's the only thing I've really seen for sure that I could is chalcopyrite in the skarn portion of it. The skarn really only exists in the very top of the ridge. It forms that high standing kind of ridge at the very top above what we call the meseta, which is a blanket of till that's kind of, topographic inversion at the very top. And then it goes down the east side. And as you go further east along, it transitions from a garnet magnetite skarn. It gets into kind of a colder mineralogy and just more of a calc silicate, and then into almost like a sediment hosted deposit down there. So down on the flank where we'll be drilling shortly, it's sandstone hosted copper. Basically, it's mostly it's copper oxides and some crystal coal and stuff, and disseminated chalcopyrite at depth.
Should I put up an image, gentlemen?
You've got one slide, I think, with the hole 35 going across it, which has got 68 meters at 0.6 or something. 70 meters. There we go. 70 meters, 71 meters at 0.6% copper. So that is that what you're saying? That those
next slide up, Nolan, is even better, I think. If you go, this one here, this cross section, that's kind of a schematic section. This shows everything in a so what I was talking about just now, that east side of the thing, that east flank where it goes down. So in a nutshell, what this is it's an anticline of sediments of sandstone transitioning up into carbonates, into limestone, and intrusions come up and core the center of that anticline. Okay. The best skarns are above that on the east side. On the west side, it's more complicated stuff. There is some skarn, but it's more just associated with the dikes and stuff. You don't get the broad skarnification you do as on the upper and east side of it.
Okay, and when you for the resource that you put in your pit, I didn't see that in your presentation. So, but is it basically the bottom of the pit goes down to the base of that oxidation and then across?
Exactly. Yeah.
And Nolan, perhaps with your mouse, can you on the 3D image, the one on the left, can you kind of just outline the kind of where the pit, you think, just from memory, where the pit goes?
It'd be right there.
Okay.
Do you see that?
Okay. Yeah. Nolan, I could in a sense, I could tell that you'd done a CFA and an MBA when you put your presentation together. Could you just drop the image, please, for a second? Because your presentation is full with fantastic figures and comparable stuff, but it doesn't go back to the kind of the basics that I was kind of tons and grade that I'm quite interested in. Do you, off the top of your head, either of you remember the tons and grade and the kind of the gold component of your overall resource?
John would know that. We have an older side. We don't keep the gold in here anymore because it's all oxide. Basically, there's no way to recover it in our current.
Okay, so when you talk about a grade of 0.37% copper, that's just copper.
Correct. Yes. No equivalency.
Okay, no equivalency. Okay, that's helpful. And how many tons of the stuff have you got?
So we've got 426 in terms of resource, and then in the mine plan, 365 is mined.
Okay.
Of leached material. Sorry.
So 365 at the average grade goes through that.
Correct.
And have you got kind of high grade portions that you put through in the first couple of years or so? That's
right. Yes. The overall grade, so the resource is 426 million tons at 0.37%. The mine plan PEA is 365 million tons at 0.38%. And the first 5 years of that is at 0.49%. So it's a very impressive high grade oxide operation at 50,000 tons per day processing for the first 5 years.
Okay. And when you talk about 52,000 tons of copper per annum, presumably it's more front loaded than that. So you'll get a higher tons out the front.
That's right. Yes. It'd be somewhere 56, 58 in the first few years.
Okay. And how much metallurgical test work were you able to do prior to this PEA? I mean, how many holes, are you, Nolan, with your kind of project engineering background, you're probably going to be the most sensitive to this, making sure that the geologists have got their thinking caps on. You're a mineral processing.
I'm a metallurgist. Yes, that's right. Yeah. So in terms of metallurgy, we have done the sequential leach test to confirm that the metallurgy is amenable to heap leaching. We have not done bottle roll testing or column leach testing yet, which are important to fully understand the resource. But our metallurgists for the PEA use conservative recovery estimates and time, and also acid consumption to generate the PEA numbers that went into the economic model.
Have you got any acid consuming minerals in the mix? I mean, you talked about sediments.
Yes.
You know, have you got any carbonates in there?
There are some, John. Maybe you can elaborate, but there are not anything. There's nothing here that is, you know, extremely acid consuming, at least from what we've understood so far from what our metallurgist has seen. John, do you have any thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, again, it's got to be about, I think 75 to 80% of the resource is within intrusive rocks. Originally, some of these rocks were misidentified as a hornfels sandstone rocks, but they're actually, and this is one thing I just determined from my trip a few days ago, that the whole west flank, which had previously been mapped as hornfels, so calcareous rocks that have been altered by the intrusion, they're not. It's a fine diorite. It's mostly diorite hosted. So because it just didn't make sense that we were getting, you know, pretty good, very reasonable, low acid consumption from the center of the deposit out to the west and to the south. And I couldn't really reconcile that with the fact that it should have been like a calcareous host and stuff, but it in fact isn't. It's a diorite. The skarn that sits on top, what you see in the field is that there's some pods of limestone that are left behind, but the mineralization transitions really quickly into the skarn. So you don't get a lot of lime making its way into the garnet and magnetite skarn. It's a pretty sharp transition. The blocks of limestone, it's a very fine-grained, tight limestone, so it's not that permeable. So the fluids either altered it completely or they didn't even get into it. It's very tight contacts up there. So in terms of acid consumption, the carbonate's actually not that big a component. What we have to watch out for more is the magnetite and some of the garnet. So magnetite can consume quite a bit of acid too. But again, fortunately, I've seen skarns where a lot of the mineralization is actually disseminated within the magnetite and garnet, but it's not the case here. The chalcopyrite in the skarn is more kind of it forms more coarse mineralization stuff at the contacts, almost like an endoskarn within the intrusions. So I think that's why we're seeing better acid consumption numbers than originally expected.
And presumably you've got not that much copper sitting in the skarns. I mean, if it's principally the chalcopyrite in the skarns, presumably you've got a relatively small proportion of the total copper is actually kind of skarn related or garnet magnetite related.
It is. Yeah, it's just the skarn's higher grade, but it's just not volumetrically, it's not that significant. It's such a huge deposit. It's a kilometer across, just the intrusive thing, and a kilometer. So yeah, so volumetrically it's not that big a deal. But ideally, the nice thing about the skarn is it's at the very top. So the first couple of years of the production is right off the top of the ridge, basically zero strip. All the best grades are right at the top. So the skarn is as fortuitous as it could be. Yeah. That's one of the things that attracted me to this project to begin with, is that you don't see many projects like this where you have the highest grade sitting right at the top of a ridge. And you know, it just as good as it gets technically, really. Yeah.
I mean, that's why we see such a high grade option for the first 5 years. It's quite impressive, right? 25% higher than the average.
Yeah, no, that's nice. But as you said, you're going to be wanting to be able to control a portion there. Make sure you don't get too much magnetite and the garnet in there, because that will
that's correct.
Consume a bit more acid. But that's something you'll be able to work out with time. It's not a deal breaker.
Exactly.
What was I going to ask? I mean, I know you're going to be doing column tests coming up, but have you thought about what your front end of the process is going to look like in terms of might you be able to whack a magnet in some kind of agglomeration drum and just pull out some of the, I don't know how fine you're going to be crushing it, or you know what you've thought on what your size fraction analysis has done, whether you've done 1-stage crushing, 2-stage crushing. Have you thought about the front end of the process before you put stuff on the leach pad?
So right now it's just a standard conventional run-of-the-mill pardon the pun, heap leach project. So it's going to be, I think, 1 stage. I can't remember exactly if it's 1 or 2-stage crushing straight onto a heap leach pad. Nothing beyond that at the moment. But that, of course, is an option for future work as we further engineer this the project. You know, first thing we do is put out a demonstration of the potential value of the asset, and then we work our butts off over the next few years figuring out the right size, the right components, the right technologies to use. There's a lot of room involved in that. I did that for most of my career before I moved into the finance side of the industry. So very experienced with that and know the type of activities that will have to be done.
I'm sure. I'm sure. And yes, it is all that technical work, all those hard yards, getting the engineering right and the assumptions right. I will come on to that because there's a question on assumptions, which I like. But first of all, on geological exploration, the potential of the area, you've got the La Mancha Amarilla, which means kind of the yellow stain bit, which you say is only half drilled. Is that a function of access, because it looked pretty rugged topography, or just geological appetite, exploration appetite?
Maybe I pull up this map again here.
Yeah, please.
Of the overall site. So, and John can talk about this in a second. 25,000 meters of drilling in this orange circle here. That's the main resource, the Meseta. And then, yes, immediately to the south of that is the Mancha Amarilla, which we're in the process of drilling right now. As you mentioned, when I say half drilled, we speak of the overall, what we believe is the overall deposit, with the Meseta being one half drilled and understood to an extent to date. And then if we prove the mineralogy continues and it's the same type of mineralogy, then at least at a geological level and a scientific level, we'll have a good understanding and belief that this is a resource that's only been half drilled, has the potential to double in size. Of course, we would need further drill work to understand that to a economic level for a resource statement, but we understand that as well. And then John, maybe you could elaborate on that and talk about the rest of the drill potential of the property that we're currently exploring as well through surface sample work.
Sure. Yeah. So the Mancha Amarilla, it hadn't been drilled for two reasons. One basically is just logistics, time constraints. This deposit was initially targeted as a skarn. So the first 10 holes are basically just drilling the skarn. And then towards the end of that program, they kind of realized, hey, there's some porphyry-like mineralization sticking out the sides of this Meseta area, the thick till-covered area plateau at the top. So they put one tentative hole, their last hole, that first program in that, realized they had porphyry mineralization. And so when they came back, then they just started drilling that off. Now, it's a big area. It's a kilometer across, right? And so it took them the next two campaigns just to drill that off at 200-meter base space centers. And it's just a question. And they had like 4 drill rigs going at the time. That one photo that we have in the presentation. So they hit it pretty hard, and you can't fault them for their efforts and how they were going. They just didn't get to the Mancha Amarilla. It is a very steep, rugged area. We had a hell of a time getting in there just to sample it. And so I think they would have eventually got to there, but they drilled the best stuff first, the most obvious stuff first, and you can't fault them for doing that.
And the drilling, are they a lot of vertical holes, or are they inclined holes? What's the kind of the preferred orientation here?
In the skarn, they're all over the place. I don't think there's a single vertical hole in this deposit. They're all inclined, 60 to 70 and some 50-degree holes in the skarn as they're trying to get across layering and stuff. So yeah, they didn't just do we're drilling vertical holes right now as we're drilling down the spine of the Mancha Amarilla, because we're just trying to get across to see that, because the as you can see in the sections, the primary stratification of the deposit is horizontal because of that enrichment. So we're just drilling vertical holes straight down. I just want to see how test the depth of that enrichment zone below the ridge crest.
And you've said that you've got a kind of a program which has started recently. You've got the winter's coming in. How much of that area are you going to be able to, or how many meters, how many holes? What's the plan for that area, and will you continue it next year?
Yeah, we planned about 2,100 meters of drilling for the Mancha Amarilla itself, and then about another 1,000 meters on the southeast skarn zone on the northeast side of that. So we're doing okay. We've got two rigs up there now, and it's a little bit of a slow start, but now they're catching up, and so we'll have that Mancha Amarilla drilled as we expected, as planned, I think, before the snow flies.
Yeah. Last year it started snowing, I think, in August. So it was could have been a long drill season. We obviously hope for that to continue. We'll drill as much as we can before we are pushed out, and the good chance that we'll get it all done as expected and avoid remobbing next year or later this year.
Okay, good. And those distal targets up in the north, what are those dashed lines based on? Yeah, John?
The dash were originally color anomalies, and then we flew some ASTER, which is satellite spectrography, that went in there and just confirmed the color anomalies. There have been prior companies back in 1999, even Tri-Metals went in there and did some reconnaissance sampling. So we knew there's copper mineralization in there. The best target is this top center one, the middle one, Rio Negro. A confirmed porphyry center there. The east one is called Arguelles Este. That was a more complicated. It's a very large body. Funny alteration. We haven't got our heads around exactly what that is. It could be a kind of a deeper, the upper levels of a deeper porphyry system. And then the western one, the kind of the southwestern one, that's a very large skarn target, but super rugged, super hard to get into. Our guys only managed to kind of skirt around the base of it and collect some samples every few hundred meters around the base of it. Some scattered skarnish mineralization, but a difficult target. So right now we're concentrating. This year we went back to Rio Negro and collected a whole bunch more chip samples, which are just about 2/3 of the results are back on those. So we're still compiling that data. And then I got in there finally just the last week to kind of confirm everything and kind of map it out. Tech was in there too in 2015 and did a one IP line and collected some reconnaissance samples too. So we have their data. And it'll be that's what we're currently permitting for drilling.
Is the supergene target in the bottom there in green?
Rio Negro, yeah.
Oh, Rio Negro up in the north. Oh,
this will be our next This will be our next permit application.
Yeah. Okay, great. Really interesting. Really interesting. I mean, I'm so old. I studied at a time when the cutoff grade on your copper project was going to be 0.4%. And here we are talking about an economic oxide at 0.38 or 0.37. I mean, it's
yeah.
The world has changed.
No, I was speaking with I know that the Glencore asset Lomas Bayas is a copper oxide project in Chile, in operations right now, and its tonnage resource is under 400 million tons, and it's grading at 0.27%. So that is, economics of oxides are very different than sulfides, but absolutely correct. When we start to get lower, it's kind of, makes a lot of people think, wow, the world has changed.
Yeah. Do you feel the kind of the Chile overlay, the kind of the politics and kind of the lack of clarity perhaps on the kind of final tax rates and royalties is clouding your hearing in the market? Are people just saying, we'll wait a bit until we know more?
I do get that message a lot from some, well, no, I wouldn't say a lot, but some investors do have those concerns. When you look really closely at it, I would say, first of all, the concerns are probably a little bit overblown, but we don't hear a lot of news out of Chile. Most people aren't keyed into what the government is doing down there. They get snippets of policies that come out, and without context, it's hard to understand. So, but absolutely, there is some sort of overhang from that. I do look at other peer companies though, and I do say, we're all operating in Chile, and I look at how they're performing and the messaging that they're having to deal with. And largely they're unaffected by it. So it's either, when there is perceived risk, maybe people are going to the larger, more well-known junior exploration companies in South America and Chile, or, the market's already priced in the risk and it's just not a concern for them, largely speaking. But yeah, nobody has come to me directly and said, I'll never invest in Chile or anything of that nature. Generally, I soothe them over a little bit. And we'll start to see that. As I think what's important is that the government just took power about a month ago. And before that, the messaging was largely being led by disparate groups, uncoordinated, who kind of seized the microphone while the government was in transition. I don't even know the previous president's name because he or she basically didn't do much or in terms of messaging or anything for 6 months, waiting for a new government to take over. So when I was in Chile 2 weeks ago for CESCO, the mining minister addressed the conference 3 times for the first time, gave 3 different speeches that kind of started to reassure the industry that mining is here to stay and the government is going to be working with mining and seeking investment opportunities. Good.
Well, thank you for the reassuring message. It's always good to get the latest from the street, so to speak. The other thing I noticed about your PEA was that you put in a Monte Carlo analysis, Monte Carlo simulation. Has that been well received?
Some people have come to me and said, this is really nice to see. MBA, CFA, as well as a technical background, I had to put a little bit of my own flavor in there. and I thought it would be useful to do a Monte Carlo dynamic sensitivity beyond just the static sensitivity. So some people did appreciate it. Many analysts did. So this is a nice touch. That's my own signature on the project, and the press release too, and good information to have.
No, I really like it as well. Back in the day, I did a master's in technical and financial evaluation of mineral deposits, and involved doing quite a lot of work on Monte Carlo simulation and analysis. And it's really good to see that your range is in there. I like the fact that you put in the as the capex and opex parameters as a plus 65% and a plus, 135%. You flexed the upside on the costs. You gave a nice range for optimization on the recoveries. What was it? You could put 67.5 up to 77.5. That's right. So, you gave yourself some wiggle room there. Again, conservatively taking a kind of a lower recovery at points, but also giving yourself a bit of wiggle room for optimization. And similarly on the copper, on the payability and on the metal prices. And your top metal price you went from $3 to $4.20 on that range. Yeah, I really, I think that's an excellent bit of work.
Thank you.
And I like the fact that the NPV didn't change. The P90 valuation came out at $1 billion, and the IRR came down a bit to 34%, but it's still very, very healthy.
Yeah, so, and that's we were trying to demonstrate that the P90 is very important. So people can pick out individual assumptions, but here it is, all of them. Statistics, take it as you will. I think it's another layer of information that people can work with.
Did any of your clients previously want to see a Monte Carlo simulation when you were working for S&C-Lavalin or subsequently?
Yeah, when I worked for S&C-Lavalin, one client did. My boss was like, "Hey, we should see if they'd be interested in this." I presented it to their executives, and they were like, this looks interesting. I don't really understand it. I understand DCF and I understand IRR. So, I do think it needs to become a tool that's more commonly used. It's invaluable for decision-making processes. And, this is the type of company that we are as well, that we want to be using those types of tools. So
when I was an analyst at HSBC, I introduced some probabilistic modeling, and I was just like people that said, no.
Yeah, exactly.
You what?
I didn't take it too far, and I didn't start playing with weird distributions of the probabilities of the input assumptions, right? That's why they're all straight in the middle, upside, downside potential with reasonable probability distribution curves. So
yeah, no. So when I did my master's, what is it now, 25 years ago, and I don't think I've seen anybody using Monte Carlo simulation since then.
You have now.
I have now, no, and I salute it, and I'm
Thank you.
Chapeau. Right, now on to we should, in the interest of time, we better move on to Zonia. Let's park Cristal, the other asset. Well, let's just mention it really briefly. It's up in the north of Chile. You're going to be drilling 5 or 6 holes this year, and putting in $1 million. Is that?
Yeah,
more or less it for Cristal?
The aim is actually more like 2 to 3 holes, and the intent there is to get them into what we consider a donut-shaped anomaly. But to do that, we have to go through about 500 or 600 meters of cover. And this is why we largely believe that this deposit has not been explored or discovered previously. There's been no drilling at all on the property we have, and you can't do surface sampling work, of course, since we believe it's covered. So it'll be a small program just to test out the mineralization in that donut-shaped anomaly. And for a small program of $1 million, it's worth a shot. It's a high reward, low risk program for us, but certainly gives the market a little bit of that blue sky flavor that everybody craves these days as well.
Okay, thank you. Cristal covered, onto Zonia.
Yeah, certainly.
Is it Zonia or Zonia?
Zonia, that's how I call it. Yeah, so do you want me to explain it?
Zonia, wasn't she a warrior princess? Or was that, oh no, that was Xenia, I think it was.
Xena, yeah, Xena.
Xena.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Right, okay, please explain your warrior princess to me.
Yeah, so Zonia is a brownfield asset in Arizona, last in production in the 60s and 70s. A lot of juniors have tried to get it started along the way. I largely think that, we've never really had a sustained $4 copper price environment, which, many analysts, certainly a large portion of the market, are now tending to favor us being in this environment for the near future and most likely into the long term as well. At a $4 price target, at least, this is a very attractive asset. It's a copper porphyry system as well, 50,000 meters of drilling done on it, a PEA from 2014. The PEA economics were at $3 copper, 198 million initial capital, about a $200 million after-tax NPV. At $4 copper, it's a 450 million after-tax NPV, 150 million after-tax first-year free cash flow. It's payback in a little bit over a year at $4 copper. It sits on private patented land in Arizona, which allows for an accelerated and aggressive permitting timeline that doesn't require an environmental impact statement or the involvement of the US EPA in a coordinated manner. It's mostly going to separate permitting agencies and getting one-off permits. So we believe we can permit it in 3 to 4 years and catch the highs that we all expect in the near future for copper prices. That's our goal right now. So since we picked it up 2 months ago and it's now finally in our portfolio, I've got our geologists like John assessing the data, making sure that it's accurate, doing the desktop reviews. We'll do a resource statement update to move in some mineralization that was not included in the last resource update. And then, Bennett, see what the new higher copper prices do for cutoff grades. And then we'll do a PEA update and a strategic assessment of the next steps. Sorry for the long-winded
yeah, no. It's important. It's kind of information sharing. Again, kind of low grade. It kind of worries me. 0.3% copper. I see that you've got kind of geological areas which are untested. You've got anomalies that you want to look at. John, what's the potential here? Is there any way that you can get that grade up a bit? Is there any way you can find some higher grade bits? Have they misunderstood the geology? Or does it not really matter because of something you're about to tell me?
Merle, I've been working on this for probably 7 years now, because originally I was with Cordero, before Cordero was taken in with World Copper. So I've been working on this project basically since its inception in Cordero. Mm-hmm. We brought it off Redstone. Anyways, been there several times. It's an interesting, really kind of very interesting property in that there's not many of these in Arizona where there's basically a resource is sitting there that hasn't been taken advantage of. It's in terms of grade, you have to understand that almost every copper oxide project in the world is about this. This is just what Mother Nature deals you when you take a porphyry copper deposit and enrich it and oxidize it. The mid 0.3s, maybe up to 0.4 and stuff. That's about, you can look at almost every copper oxide deposit in the world, and that's about the grade they sit at. With there are some exceptions out there, but in terms of copper oxide, when acid soluble copper, not just like the higher grade chalcocite deposits, but the true copper oxide deposit, that's just about what you get. All the big deposits in southern Peru like that, and even in Arizona, the copper oxide project in Arizona, this is just the kind of the grade. So the grade didn't really, to me, it's in terms of the grade was fine. I was happy with that. It has fabulous metallurgy. It's one of the lowest acid consumption projects out there. It's been pre-stripped by the previous in the early 70s. They tried to do some in situ leaching, and they had 3 heap leach pads and stuff. So there you can see, Nolan just brought on the screen there. So you basically have a deposit that was a mine that was started up and pre-stripped for you and just sitting there now and just gone into sleep mode for all these years because of the price of copper and whatnot. It's had an odd history of ownership, private ownership and stuff, just mismanagement. And so now it's just, it doesn't get any easier in terms of just a startup. When we took the Redstone did a good job of kind of putting a large claim block together. Yeah, Lon, if you could just stay here for a second. So if you look at where the southwest portion of the map, that's the initial area that's been drilled up. All those black dots are all the drilling, right? So it's been drilled in many campaigns over the last 40, 50 years. So it's a well-defined resource now. It's had several pre-feasibility and feasibility studies done by half a dozen different companies, large U.S. companies. And again, it was always just a little bit shy in terms of size and grade and stuff for the larger companies. So they just kind of would do it and kind of and they'd walk away. They didn't push on with it. Right now, in terms of the size, it's been bottlenecked because trying to keep the permitting minimal, we kind of snipped the resource off so that the heap leach pad would fit on the private land. So those resource numbers that Nolan just spoke about, they've been artificially limited by the available surface area to put the heap leach on. Okay, the Redstone did a kind of a more global resource estimate with a large pit that took in all the oxidized mineralization, and you get upwards of it's more like 150, 160 million tons.
And the PEA is 100 million tons.
Okay. That's right. Yeah. So it's a bigger deposit than it looks. Anyway, and then one of the first things we did when we had the project then is I realized that there hadn't been any really coherent corner to corner exploration done. So we did a 200 meter space geochem grid over the entire property. We also acquired the Silver Queen claims off to the southeast, those green claims on the southeast. Yes. We also acquired those because we had an old mag map from down there that seemed to show that maybe only half the porphyry was exposed and the other half was on the Silver Queen property. So we also did the geochem on that and did some more geophysics, and that idea kind of went out the window. It didn't turn out. But what we ended up with was this nice northeast anomaly, which is a moly high, a copper high, and then really importantly, it's a zinc low. So the zinc low shows that there was a coherent large system operating up there, which this is the hallmark of a porphyry deposit. And previously, you can see there's a bunch of little workings. Other people had gone in there, had looked at some of the orogenic quartz veins and stuff, looking for gold, and there's some high grade copper workings and some scarring up there, but no one had really put together any kind of a cohesive sampling thing to delineate like a porphyry deposit. So now we have this untested anomaly that's three, if you do a back of the envelope, it's like probably in the area of 300 to 500 million tons. So twice the size of the Zonia deposit in terms of what it could have, and no drilling in it. So that's kind of our first exploration.
And has it got the kind of the Arizona classic kind of gravel cover, or is it?
No, it doesn't. It's no cover. Only at the very sea. If you look at carefully at the north edge of that map, you'll see it in gray post mineral cover. Yeah. So it looks like about half of it is, or maybe let's say a third of it. The northern third might go underneath the conglomerate and basalt, some really young units. But the 2/3 of it, if not, at least 2/3 are exposed. And I mean, yeah, you can walk along the surface there and see copper oxides, and there's lots of little showings and stuff. It's as good a target as you can get in Arizona in terms of test. You just don't see this. I've reviewed so many projects in Arizona, and you just one of the big questions here is it's kind of an oddball in that the rocks that it's in are Precambrian. They're quite foliated. And so for years, well, anyway, since the 70s anyways, this deposit was thought of as a VMS deposit, even though there aren't any massive sulfides anywhere. There's some high-grade zones in the old mine workings, but they were mostly going after like high-grade chalcocite along structures. So there's no real, and the rocks are all plutonic too. They're not even volcanic. So it's kind of odd that some other geologists interpret it as a VMS. The biggest question right now, and what seemed to get some people interested, whether it's a laramide age or not. I don't know if you're familiar with, in Arizona, all the deposits, the big ones are all laramide age. It still could be. It could be a laramide age mineralization overprinting on these older Precambrian rocks and textures and stuff. It's really hard to tell. It's been so supergene enriched and weathered that it's really hard to know the age of the mineralization. We have to go in there and date the molybdenum to be sure either way.
My little strat column I got on the side there doesn't pick up the laramide subset of the Archean or the Precambrian. That's what I was checking.
No. Sorry, laramide is young. Yeah, it's tertiary.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, it was in the mineralization. So the rocks are Precambrian. The mineralization is
tertiary. Yeah. In the laramide's kind of 60 million years, something there. 62. You won't be on a time scale. It's kind of it's a term that's used mostly just in the Southwest U.S.
Yeah, no, it's not on my. It's not on my British or my. It's not on my.
No, it would not be on your British thing.
The laramide orogeny.
Well, we don't use the word tertiary anymore either, of course, right? So. It's an academic point. Yeah, Merlin, it's an academic point.
Yeah.
You got to go with it. If one way or another, I don't really care what age it is, as long as there's copper there, right? So we'll find out. But for some people, they get really excited. They want, if it's laramide, they think there's going to be a deposit there, and if it's not, it's amazing. So,
John, could you just describe kind of if I drilled a hole in the center of your of the main deposit there at Zonia, what would I be intersecting, and how far would I go down in oxide before I hit low grade fresh sulfides?
You go down about 200 to 250 meters. It's deeper in the northeast end, and it shallows up towards the southwest end. Southwest end, 100 meters, you'd be into sulfides. Northwest end, you're about 250, 300 meters to sulfides. And it's almost the same as you saw it. It's all Cristacola. Mostly Cristacola, okay. Tenorite, the copper wad, that kind of same stuff. Again, you see a little azurite right at the transition to chalcocite, but very little true enrichment. It goes from oxidized to primary very quickly. The enriched mineral, where you get just chalcocite on primary sulfides, is thin, on the order of 10, maybe 10, 20 meters maximum. Very low. Would
you look at it as an ISR? I mean, if you said that there's no carbonates, if it's a fractured Precambrian intrusive rock, you've got Cristacola, it seems as if it's a perfect candidate for in situ recovery.
No, never do in situ recovery. It doesn't work. don't even say those words. There's no point. This thing's ready for pre-strip. You take it out, you put it in a heap leach, and you get all the copper out. It's fine. It's very. It has one of those lowest. One of the lowest. Acid consumption I've seen. It doesn't get any better than Zonia because it's just all intrusive hosted.
Just because it's unreactive, intrusive.
Yeah.
Calcilicates and
felsic intrusives. Yeah, dacite porphyries and granite. Yeah.
And why are you so allergic to ISR? Because you've had bad experiences, or because there's no need to do it here?
There's no need to do it here, and both. Give me an example of when that works. If you have any knowledge of porphyry in situ leach, works for stuff like uranium and whatnot. But I want to get on a side note here. But porphyry deposits are notorious for being in super fractured, faulted units and stuff. And try to put water down there and recover it, it's a disaster. I mean, I can't imagine every portion. The reason they're porphyries is because they're in just blasted rock. That's how the mineralization got there to begin with. So it started with quite fractured rock, and it just gets worse from there. Every unit that comes in fractures it more and more. So they're Enough said.
John, enough said. Enough said. Nolan, John, thank you so much. We've been talking for whatever it is, 45 minutes, 40 minutes. I've learnt a huge amount about both your projects. I trust that this is going to go on and the viewers are going to get the same educational process, which is the whole point of doing this. Thank you very much. Nolan, is there stuff that you want to tell me about that we haven't covered? I'm not talking about your deepest, darkest secrets, but something about the company.
No, of a technical nature, not really. I would just say that, take a really good look at what we've got going on at World Copper. We've got the right management team. We've got the right expertise, such as gentlemen like John, and we can know what we need to do to develop our assets. We have also people like Marcelo Awad, who's the former CEO of Antofagasta for 8 years. He knows how to develop and build assets in Chile for Escalones. It's really the story that we're building here with World Copper is very exciting. And I'd say that both of these assets, each of them on their own, could be a company builder for any other junior. And we happen to have two of them with the right team in place. It's really worth people's attention to take a look at what we've done with the small amount of time we've been given and what we're going to do over the next few years.
Well, great. Thank you on that note. Why don't we leave it there? Actually, before we do that, can you just talk me through the kind of quarter by quarter, what you're expecting in terms of kind of the main news flow, just to give me a kind of something to come back to next time, so I remember what you said you were going to be doing this year.
So we are in the process of drilling Escalones. So we will be expecting to get results from that back in late Q2, early Q3. We also expect to have the surface sampling results from Rio Negro in the next couple months. And then we will start permitting, as I mentioned, for Rio Negro. So some of that news may be coming out, successfully getting those at some point. And then Zonia, we will be starting drilling there this summer. So start to see news from that in the late fall. And then also Cristal is at a lower elevation in Chile, so we can drill there in the Chilean winter. We aim to get something up there in our late summer in North America and Europe, and that would also give us results for the fall. So steady news flow, and that's not even including all the corporate development activities. We expect to be uplisted from the OTC to the OTCQX very soon. As well, we expect to be off the TSX Venture very soon. We're in the process of these activities. So, plenty of growth on both fronts. We know what it takes to build a company. It takes assets, and it takes the corporate development activities that we're going to be doing as well. So lots of news coming on many different angles. Keep your eyes peeled.
I will keep my eyes peeled. For me, the things I'm most interested in are the Escalones drilling and the Zonia drilling.
Yes.
John, over to you for the drill results. I will hold your toes to the fire. But gentlemen, thank you. In all seriousness, thank you very much. It's been of great interest, and I look forward to hearing from you in the future.
Great, thanks.
Thanks,